Good.
All yours.
Thanks, Walter. All the good things I said about Walter, I still feel, and the snarky things I said, I take back. Saturday will be the end of an exceptional experience for Adele and myself, and that is spending a month at Oak Hammock. It's been a wonderful time. We've had the opportunity to get to know many of you. I wish we had enough opportunity to get to know all of you. And we're thinking very seriously of imposing ourselves on the Oak Hammock family on a permanent basis at some point. As Walter said, this has been a rather exceptional few days. I am on the board of ACT, which for those of you in education know is one of the two testing. It is in the not easiest place to get in America, Iowa City, Iowa. And I found out that the nonstop service from Gainesville to Iowa City, Iowa was especially limited. But we had this October is always the annual meeting of ACT, so it's kind of a time where we are looking to what our future is going to be. And it's an exciting future in higher education and in the other areas in which ACT is involved. And Adele and I left with a high level of enthusiasm. And we left from Iowa City to Chicago, where our oldest granddaughter, who had her 22nd birthday last night, we celebrated that together, is a senior at Northwestern and will be graduating this June. So we wanted to have a chance to see a little bit of her life and experiences, and that was gratifying. Then today, things went great from the time we left our hotel in Evanston to the O'Hare Airport, and from there to Atlanta. Then we got on the plane in Atlanta. That's why I try to go through Charlotte when I can. And we're rolling down the runway, and we lost an engine. That's not a happy way to get started. So we had to pull off into the taxiway, and the mechanics came and they did whatever magic they did, and we took off. We flew here to Gainesville. At this point, we're now about 30 minutes behind schedule, and the ramp that connects the terminal to the airplane had malfunctioned. So everybody had to walk down these narrow stairs one at a time to get off the plane. And then we got to the baggage claim, and Adele's absolutely favorite bag, in fact, if she had to make a choice between the bag or me, I know who it would be, had gotten a little smashed in the cargo hold, so we had to spend a little time filling out forms for that. So I don't want to unload I guess I have just unloaded. Adele, incidentally, will be joining us shortly. She felt that while I could come looking like I'd been on an airplane all day, she needed to look a little bit better. So she is, when she reaches that pinnacle, she'll join us. One of the things that we did when we were in Chicago, and I'm going to try to make this as nonpartisan as possible, so this is more in the nature of autobiography rather than editorialization. My granddaughter has taken a semester for which Northwestern is giving her credit. They collected their $52,000 of tuition, but they gave her credit for working in the Obama campaign, which is in downtown Chicago. So she took us to meet some of her friends and colleagues there, which was very interesting. I'll say one thing: whatever you may feel about Obama, he is a very organized person. I've been around politics a lot of my adult life, and most of it is just slightly organized chaos. But the Obama campaign was like a well-oiled military operation. They had in each of the several rooms in which they occupied different functions, some of which were functions that I could hardly pronounce, particularly those that had to do with all the ways that a modern political campaign gets inside your head with digital and other electronic forms of communication. And incidentally, and I hope this is not immodest, but while I was there, the campaign manager, David Axelrod, asked me to come to the debate on Monday night to be a spinner. Now, a spinner is the person who, after the event is over, goes and tells you what the event consisted of in a way that is as favorable as possible to your candidate. So if you watch the debate on Monday and you'd like to stay up a little bit longer, I might thrust myself on you again, this time in your living room or bedroom where you're trying to get ready to go to sleep. This has been an important, but in my opinion, frequently a disappointing presidential election. In a democracy, an election is intended to be the opportunity for the people to set the general direction for their government. In order for that to occur, the candidates and their campaigns have a responsibility to describe to the people what it is that they see as the future and what do they intend to do if given the opportunity to serve or to serve again. I don't think that's happened much in this campaign. One of the criticisms of the debate Tuesday night was that it didn't talk very much about the future. What direction did the candidates intend to take the country if they were elected, not looking in a rearview mirror, but looking in the direction of tomorrow? I think there are a number of very significant issues that the American people need to give some direction on. The one that is the most obvious is the economy. We've been through a very difficult period. I was born in 1936. I can't say that I knew the Great Depression, but as a little towards the end of the Great Depression, I got some idea of what my parents had been through. My mother had a weekly allowance from my father, for which she was supposed to buy all the food and do the other things necessary to keep the household together. I think it was $25 a week that she had to feed all of us and do the other things. And out of that $25, every week she would put $2 or $3 aside for some emergency. So even in our family, and I'm not going to say that our family was in a near poverty situation, the impacts of that depression were very tangible and real. What we've just been through and what we, I hope, are now emerging from has also been very tangible and real for millions of Americans. And so appropriately, that should be the priority issue for candidates to talk to the American people as to what their plans are to deal not only with the immediate crisis, but those things that cause the crisis that we are in today. I personally don't think that this economic situation is just your everyday business cycle that which we've all experienced. I think something more fundamental is going on. One of those is the enormous rapidity of change, particularly change driven by technology. Think of what it was like just 10 or 20 years ago in the pre-mass use of computers and other forms of modern communication. What a different world it was. When I went into the U.S. Senate in 1987, shortly after I was sworn in, the Secretary of the Senate sent one of his staff to meet with me and talk about what I was going to have in my office. Probably the thing I best remember was that of all the things that I had in my Senate office, which included about 60 employees and typewriters and shelves and furniture, there was only one thing for which I was going to have to sign a piece of paper to be personally responsible that it was there on the day I left the Senate. What do you think that one thing was? Was it the computer? Was it the iPhone? Of course, that was pre-iPhone. What do you think I had to take personal responsibility for? Desk? No. No, not the typewriter. What's that? Not the telephones. Well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the answer is the dictionary. Now, I know what had to have happened is that in 1843, somebody who had just been defeated for re-election and was packing up to leave saw this nice thick dictionary on his desk and said, that looked pretty good on my desk at home or in my office back in Illinois or wherever I came from, and took it. And so the Senate was alarmed. We lost the dictionary. And says, how can we avoid this happening? Well, we're going to have everybody sign a piece of paper saying that if another one is stolen, they've got to come up with probably at that point, the $10.98 that the dictionary cost. The other thing that I got was computers. We had, as I say, 60 people. About 30 of them were in Washington. The other 30 were at one of 3 offices in Florida. How many computers do you think in 1987 a Senate office got to operate with that number of people and locations? Well, the answer is 3. You got it right. Congratulations. What's your name? Huh? Sue, a very smart lady here in the front. She's not wearing orange and blue. That's too bad. But other than that, yesterday when we were in the offices in Chicago, how many computers would you think were in that room, Adele? Must have been at least 500. I mean, there were more computers than there were desks. But that rapidity of change in terms of technology is one of the things that's making this a different economic cycle than we've been used to. Now, one thing that some of you are used to, and I have had the opportunity to get to know very well over the last 53 years, just arrived. And I'd like to introduce my wife, Adele. Yeah.
You've heard about our trip. Yes. It's the truth.
Wait a minute.
Being here with you all, and we have enjoyed every moment here. Your community is fabulous, and we hope to be here with you soon. And thank you all for your friendship, for coming today.
Right. Big old kiss. If I could, am I a lucky man to have Adele as our wonderful spouse? We shared 53 great years, 4 children. I told them about the birthday party we had last night with our oldest granddaughter. It's just been a wonderful experience, and it was largely fortuitous. Adele was a year behind me at the University of Florida, and the year she was a freshman and I was a sophomore, I had some meeting at the administration building, and the meeting had ended and I was leaving, walking down the stairs, and I see this beautiful brunette walking up the stairs. Well, I didn't pay too much attention, but I was not impolite or indifferent. And so I asked, "What are you here for?" And the answer was that her father had gone to Georgia Tech. The dean of students at the University of Florida was in his class at Georgia Tech. How many here remember Dean Beatty? He was long time, yes, dean of students. And that her father had told her that if she ever had a problem, to go see Dean Beatty and he'd take care of it. So I got a problem. What is your problem? Well, the problem was C21. And some of you may remember those old C courses. C21 was the physical sciences. And she said, I'm just took an exam, didn't do very well, and I'm looking for a tutor. Now, I mean, I'll ask you this question, and you can just think of what is the ethical answer. I had taken that course the year before. I had made an A in the course.
You set the curve.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. And I said, and I will help. I will be your tutor. And she, with some misgivings, accepted that offer, but it had a very, very good outcome, which had nothing to do with geology. There were some other subjects, but not geology. So the first thing about this that I think is a big challenge is, what should America be doing to respond to the new economic world in which we live? I don't think we've gotten thus far in this campaign an adequate outline from the candidates as to what they see as our economic future and how they would propose to lead the country. The second big area is the world has changed. For much of our lifetime, the world has been organized around our enemies. During World War II, we knew who our enemies were. We were fighting them in one of the most violent wars in man's history. Almost immediately after World War II, we went into the Cold War, and we knew who our adversary was, the Soviet Union. Then in 1989, when the wall fell in Berlin, suddenly we didn't have a discrete enemy. For a period of time, we were in a world in which we were the only power. We could virtually do anything we wanted to. We made the Roman Empire look like a weak little gathering in terms of our military, political, economic power. Then, beginning about a dozen or so years ago, we began to appreciate that our enemy was not going to be another big nation state, but was going to be a collection of tribes who didn't recognize national boundaries, who didn't have ambassadors, embassies, foreign ministers with whom you could sit down and negotiate, whose policies were driven by extremist ideologies, and a willingness to kill innocents almost at will. That's the world in which we live today. I don't think we've had an adequate description by the candidates of how they would deal with that fundamental world. Although, if you listened to the last debates and the one that's going to occur on Monday from Boca Raton, which will be exclusively devoted to foreign policy, you could come away from the debate thinking that the only part of the world that meant anything to the United States was Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. Of course, those are important, but we've got lots of other interest in Europe, in Asia, and the rest of the world that are part of our global concern. Again, I don't think we've had that adequately described. But the third and maybe the most significant change, in my judgment, is this enormous political gridlock through which we are wrapped, where it's very difficult to get almost any big issue, such as the two I just mentioned, economics and foreign policy, dealt with. This is unusual in our system. We've had political parties since the Adams-Jefferson election in 1800, but we've never had the country as divided as it is today. One of the consequences of the fact that this campaign hasn't put before the American people some clear choices is that it's not likely, unfortunately, to make a contribution to breaking this gridlock. One of the ways that a political campaign can contribute to consensus rather than division is the word mandate. Ronald Reagan was elected president in 1980. Whether you agreed or disagreed with Ronald Reagan, he laid out in clear, understandable, and relatively precise terms exactly what he wanted to do if he was elected president. He was elected president, and that ushered in an unusual period of cooperation. Remember some of the pictures of Tip O'Neill, very strong Democrat Speaker of the House, and Ronald Reagan sitting down. They were sitting down in the picture with a lot of paper in front of them. I happen to know for a fact that most of the time they sat around with a little whiskey in front of them, which can contribute to the lubrication of the political process. But without the American people being given clearer choices than we're being given this year, I don't think either candidate has a great deal of license to claim that they have a mandate from the people, which will then contribute to bringing people together for a resolution. This campaign itself has been a very expensive campaign. When Jimmy Carter ran for president in 1976, I think he spent in both the primary period and the general election, where he was running against a sitting president, Jerry Ford, less than $100 million. Barack Obama is going to spend $181 million plus in the next 2 weeks. And unfortunately, one of the consequences of that is that, one, we all, particularly those of us in a major swing state like Florida, are being hammered with these highly negative ads. I've just been, as I mentioned earlier, in Iowa, which is another one of those swing states, and if anything, their television is more replete with negative political ads than even here in Florida. And the contrast is Illinois. If you want to go spend a couple of apolitical weeks, go to Illinois, because everybody knows that it's going to vote for Obama, so there ain't any political ads in Illinois. It's a very, very tranquil place. Another thing that is happening is the bifurcation, not bifurcation, but multiplication of the population during this campaign. The combination of the ability to use highly sophisticated polling techniques and statistical machines and measures to distribute that population, the ability to buy a television on the cable or the network that appeals to that specific segment of the population, whether it's women over the age of 55 or college students, is at a level that we have not known before. Again, the outcome of that is it tends to emphasize those things that divide us, separate us, make us distinctive within the larger society than those things that would bring us together. My wife, as we were riding over from the airport to here, gave me some advice. One was don't talk too long, which is advice she's been giving me consistently for 53 years. And two, to leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to try to honor her suggestions, which are always good, and they aren't suggestions, they are mandates. But let me just close by saying, in spite of some of the what might be considered downbeat comments that I have made, we live in the greatest society in the history of mankind. The way we have been able to organize ourselves with a free enterprise system giving millions and millions of people the opportunity to make free choices in terms of their economic lives, and a democratic political system which gives millions and millions of people an opportunity to participate in who is going to shape and lead our government, are gifts that no other country today or in the past has had as fully as we do here in the United States. Most of us in this room have had the opportunity over a lifetime to benefit by that. I think we have a responsibility now, which is to set a model and a standard of our behavior, which will encourage future generations to be as involved as we have been. So I'm certain that everyone in this room is registered to vote. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands on that. But when early voting starts in just a few days, and then after that, the election itself on November 6th, and the possibility of voting by mail, all of those options are available to all of us. Don't miss the opportunity to send the signal that as contentious as it is, as divided as it is, that democracy is still, as Winston Churchill once said, Americans will try everything until they finally exhaust all the bad choices and make the right one. We've made the right one in terms of our democracy. Let's participate and support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Graham. And as our procedure has been in the past, we will repeat again. We'll take questions first on one side and then the other. Please wait for the microphone. There's the microphone holder over there, so we'll start on that side. Hold your hand up if you have a question.
Thank you again for your wonderful talk.
Could I ask a question? And I'd like to ask this of all, and that is your name and 10 words of free advertising.
My name is Alice Gridley. We did run into you folks up at Chautauqua this summer, and we were delighted about that. And I chair the Environmental Committee here.
Hold the microphone close.
Okay.
I chair the Environmental Committee, and that's my plug for more people to join that. But you mentioned political gridlock, and I think many of us are aware that the pressure to raise money and the the fact that a lot of our congresspeople have to rush home to raise money and they don't live together is part of the problem where they're not getting along. Do you see anything that might help to break that situation that we've got right now?
Well, one I'm afraid that we probably have missed, which is using this campaign as an opportunity for the American people by their votes to determine a basic direction for the country on issues such as economics and foreign policy. With that one not likely to be available, we're going to have one hell of a crisis beginning about November the 7th. We have two big train wrecks that are going to occur between the 7th of November and the 31st of December. One is that many of our tax laws were not permanent, but were for a time specific, and for several of them, the time, see, she not only tells me what to do, she organizes my mechanical life as well. And those are going to all come to a point of ending on the 31st of December. Something's got to be done about that, or we could inadvertently throw ourselves back into another recession. I think that situation is going to be sufficiently traumatic that it's going to force people to start to collaborate at a higher level than they have without such an impending crisis.
I'm John Scott, and retired art historian at the university. You did mention the issue of the enormous amount of money that is being thrown in this campaign, and I'm very concerned with the super PACs and how there's no accountability, it seems. Do you think that a constitutional amendment is necessary to correct that situation?
No. I believe that just as we've had in the past history, the Supreme Court makes a decision which turns out to have unexpected negative consequences. The Dred Scott decision, which basically upheld slavery, was finally overturned. I believe that a future Supreme Court, in my opinion, hopefully sooner rather than later, will recognize that this was not a wise decision, that the idea that corporations are just like human beings may be correct in some applications, such as their access to the courts. That's where the original concept that corporations were the same as people. They could be sued and could sue in a court. But this idea that they are politically like human beings and that they, since we don't have restraints on our participation, they can't be restrained, I think is not consistent with what our founding fathers thought this democracy was going to be. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Governor. My name is Ray Goldwire, and my wife and I, Ann, are founding members here at Ocamok. And my question is, what network will you be spinning on after the debate?
There's a very small network from Serbia. And since I will be one of the few spinners who can speak fluent Serbo-Croatian, they'll be my principal target. The answer is, I don't know.
Senator Graham, I have a question. Why is it that neither one of the candidates is even seemingly aware when they make predictions about how they can fix the economy? one of them in particular saying he could do it on the first day, they don't seem to be aware of the fact that we are in a global economy and that our economy is very dependent on what happens in Europe, particularly right now, and in other parts of the world. There seems to be no awareness on the part of either candidate that that is an equation that has to be dealt with.
Well, I don't believe that there's no awareness. I mean, you can't be as smart as Mitt Romney or Barack Obama and not be aware of that basic truth that we no longer are an economic island, but are part of a larger planet, continent of economic activities. I think the reason is because it's unpopular with some Americans to think about the fact that we aren't the way we were with our great-great-grandparents, where we didn't have to pay much attention to the rest of the world, and that the fact that we now are in a globalized economy is kind of messy and introduces some problems that are not of our making and over which we have very limited control, like what's happening in places like Greece and Spain today. So I don't think it's a matter of being unaware. I think it's a matter of making a political calculation that it's not advantageous to dwell on that reality.
Part of the dumbing down of America.
Yeah.
I'm Pat Harden. I've been involved in water issues and
Yeah.
environmental stuff
Hello, Pat.
for many years. Hi. And my question is there, and I know it's not an easy question to answer, but is there any hope of in the near future solving or getting out of Iraq, Afghanistan, et cetera? Or do you see us just getting further and further into it, which has an impact on our economy too, both ways?
Well, I think, of course, we have essentially withdrawn from Iraq in terms of combat forces. We have 20 or 30,000 essentially security people, and we have the largest embassy in the world is located in Baghdad. I mean, just to have somebody stand by the doors of all that embassy takes a lot of folks. I'll have to say on neither of those two fronts am I very optimistic. One, Iraq is like the Serbia that I mentioned earlier. Iraq and Yugoslavia were both creatures of the end of the First World War. The countries that were largely in control of that post-war period were France and Great Britain. And they both had the attitude that the way you deal with restive people who've had a history of not getting along is to put them under the same government and then put a strong leader in charge of that government and let them try to manage the disputes that are inevitably going to arise. In the case of Yugoslavia, that was Marshal Tito. And for 40 or so years, whatever you think of his human rights and other things, he kept the peace among peoples who were quite different in religion, cultural, ethnic background. As soon as he died, the place blew up. And now instead of one country called Yugoslavia, which is off the map, we got 5 countries, of which Serbia is one, that reflect those religious, cultural, and ethnic differences. I think the same thing is very likely to happen in Iraq. Iraq was also put together by Europeans under that theory of a single state with a strong leader. And they started out with a king, and then they had a couple of military dictators, concluding with Saddam Hussein, trying to keep peace among the Kurds, the Sunnis, and the Shiites. And for the last few years, we have been the strong leader, keeping those the animosities under control. I am concerned, I'd even say I'm pessimistic as to what's going to happen next, that it is likely to go the way of Yugoslavia. In fact, and I'm now going to be commercial, when I spoke here last, I talked about a novel that I have recently written called Keys to the Kingdom, which describes that possibility in some detail. So buy the book. Afghanistan, which also is talked about a lot in the book, has been for a couple of millennia a place that has rejected foreign intervention. They kicked out the British, they kicked out, in fact, I even have a Rudyard Kipling quote, poem in the book about what Afghanistan was like 130 years ago. Then later the Russians came, and then they got kicked out. Then the Taliban came, and it got kicked out, and now we're the latest group. I just think Afghanistan is such an insular society that they're likely to reject future efforts at foreignization of the country, and there's not a lot that we can do about that. I hate to be pessimistic, but...
Governor Graham, my name is Phil Emmer, and I'm not a resident here.
Yes.
But I've known you for a long time, and I've watched you speak in many, many different locations, and always magnificently, including last week at the Phillips Center with your other 4 governors. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you, and we are now going to the Florida Museum of Natural History.
Phil, thank you. Phil and Barbara, is Barbara here? Have been wonderful friends for a long, long time, and I hope that with that explanation, you will not overly criticize Phil for his lack of judgment. Right.
Okay. My name is Alvin Warnick, and I have a ballot box question.
Oh, there, I'm sorry.
Anyway, I've been voting absentee for the last couple of elections, and I have my ballot before me now. But somebody told me that my ballot doesn't count if there's a close, if there's a decided division. But that bothers me very much because I want my vote to count. So should I not vote by absentee and go over to the ballot on November 6th?
Well, you and I and Adele are going to be in the same spot because we're going to be voting absentee for the first time this election, and we certainly are doing so with the expectation that our vote and our effort to vote will be meaningful. I am surprised at the stories that the so-called provisional ballots, which include absentee ballots, sometimes are not counted. I hope that was just an aberration and not a... Yes, you do too. You agree with that. Yes. A very bright young lady in the rear of the room. And doesn't reflect a systemic pattern. But the 3 of us can all cast our absentee ballots with our fingers crossed that they'll be counted.
I'm Bernie Webb. You touched on something that is, I think, one of our greatest difficulties. When are we going to get control of the military directional complex? Our Defense Department employs the greatest number of people in any other single agency in the world. We have 11 aircraft carriers. We have 5,000 aircraft. We have 74 submarines. When are we going to learn that we're not supposed to be the people who direct the world?
Well, I think we have become more willing to participate internationally. For instance, I think and again, I don't want to be partisan, but if George W. Bush had been president, there would be a good chance that we would have gone into Libya and would be in Syria today. The fact that we now have a policy that unless the security interest of America specifically are threatened, that we will look for an international alliance and an international ratification of the importance of using force in a particular situation. So I think that's helpful. Two, while we probably are going to have a relatively smaller military, I think the real question is it a more appropriate and smarter military? Much of the items that you just listed were items that were developed to fight a World War II type war. That's not the kind of war we're likely to be fighting. I think it's more like what disposed of Osama bin Laden, some very good intelligence combined with a small group of highly trained special operation people, Navy SEALs, and they carried out an extremely complex and highly dangerous operation with great success. I think that's the illustrative of where we should be investing our money, because that prepares us to deal with the real wars, not the remembrances of the past.
Before the next question, let me just say that Pam Carpenter, our supervisor of elections, was here at Oak-Hammock a couple of weeks ago. She was very encouraging about the effectiveness of absentee ballots and made the point that they actually are counted first. So I think we can relax those of us who use absentee ballots and know that as far as our own supervisor of elections is concerned, she's very concerned that they be treated as they should be treated back there.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And incidentally, I have worked with the supervisor here in Alachua County on a number of issues, and she is a very competent person, and if she makes that representation, I would give it great credibility.
Senator Graham, my name is Don Caldwell, and I live in Lake City, Florida.
Put the microphone closer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
said my
Don,
name
did
is-
you used to be the Don Caldwell at the Lake City Reporter?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Great.
Nice to see you again.
See you.
One of your great accomplishments in life is that we were the first newspaper to endorse you for governor, and you overcame that. And then your second thing that you overcame, we endorsed you for senator, and you overcame that. And we've had I had the privilege.
And I guess we both decided that having, roll dice right 5 times, that we better leave the table. Is that
Well,
right?
that was going to be a follow-up. We also had the privilege of leading the Confederate and Union Army in a parade, and people were afraid that they were going to shoot you, and I said no. They would be trying to shoot me and miss if they hit him. So anyhow.
Excuse me, Don, but could I just ask, how many of you have been to the Olustee battlefield? Okay. That is something I'm shocked and appalled that Walter in this great educational operation he leads has not caused a mass exodus to Olustee to see that. It's a
Well, we'll get to it.
Yeah. It's a very important, it was the only major battle fought in Florida during the Civil War, and it was the last battle that the Confederates won in the Civil War. So it's worth going to look at.
Well, thank you, and I hope that y'all take advantage of it. Now, here's my question, and it's not a benediction. I haven't known anybody very well in Tallahassee since you departed, along with your lovely wife. And I wondered, I did the counting of the number of years since you were born, and it seems like that maybe you ought to try that again for the governorship. we would welcome that.
And, well, Don, if you can promise as early and strong and persuasive an endorsement this time as you gave me in the past, you might get me to give that serious consideration.
Bob Gentry, Senator, just want to start out and compliment you. When you were governor, you did something I had never seen up to that time, a politician get out and collect garbage, and we all really appreciate that.
Yeah.
You were learning what it's really like to work in the streets. I have a two-part question. Obama has promised that we'll get out of Afghanistan by 2014. Do you think he'll honor that? And the second question is, we hear a lot about China owning us. What really is our debt to China?
On the first question, yes, I think, in fact, both President Obama and Governor Romney have said they will honor the commitment that was made largely during the Bush administration that we would exit our combat troops. We're still going to have some security people, and we'll have some trainers for the Afghanistan military and police. But insofar as carrying out active operations, that we will terminate those before the end of 2014. I would have a 99% level of confidence, whoever the next president is, that will be met. Your second question was?
We hear a lot about China owning the United States.
Yeah.
What really is our debt to China?
Well, I can't. We have a national debt of approximately $14 trillion. Of that amount, roughly half is owed to ourselves. For instance, those of us who are Social Security beneficiaries, the Social Security Trust Fund can only invest in U.S. Treasuries. So a lot of that debt is to either ourselves individually or through pension funds such as Social Security. Of the remaining half, I don't know what percentage I know the Chinese have the largest share, but I don't know precisely what the number is. And the reason that they have so much money is because they've been the big export power, which means that you build something at home, you send it overseas, and foreigners pay you to buy your products, comes back to your country, you end up with large surpluses in your treasury. Conversely, if you've been like the United States has been for much of the last 20 or so years, we don't build that much at home, therefore we're not selling to foreigners, and therefore we're not expanding our domestic fiscal resources. Is there much we can do about it? Well, the answer is there are some things we can do. One is we can start spending less money and therefore don't have to borrow as much money. And I suspect that whoever is elected president, the trend line is going to be to reducing our relative level of expenditure. Second will be to encourage either by carrot or stick China to become more like the rest of the world in its trade policies. One of the criticisms of China is that it's been undervaluing its currency. That is, if you should be able to buy 10 yuan for $1, they've been selling you 12 yuan for $1, which means that all of their exports are that much less expensive, and therefore they have a competitive, undeserved advantage over the rest of the world in their international economic activities. Those are a couple of examples. I think it's important that we become less dependent on China because there are so many areas in which they can subtly or not so subtly use their amount of economic control of the United States. For instance, we've basically turned North Korea over to the Chinese to negotiate. We being the United States plus the big European countries. Well, I don't think that's a very good idea because China has quite different interest in North Korea than we do. We're worried about the bomb. They're worried about 20 million immigrants coming across the border. But as long as we are so much in hock to the Chinese, we don't have much leverage on them to get them to adopt a negotiating position which takes more into account our interest and not as singularly their interest.
Paul Parker.
Yes, Paul.
How are you? I am semi-retired from a nameless university about 140 miles from here, so please forgive me.
How did you describe the university?
A nameless university.
Oh, nameless.
And since you're talking about gridlock, just wait till, about another month when we're going to have some gridlock.
Not the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yes, right,
Yeah.
right. We go back a long way. I remember when I met you just before you were elected to the House of Representatives. And you came in because of a Supreme Court decision that reapportioned, I think Georgia was the case.
Tennessee.
Or Tennessee. And it changed Florida. The pork chop gang had to take a back seat to people from the more urban areas of the state. And I think of that as, going back to a time when there was gridlock in Florida. And I'm wondering whether it's going to take a Supreme Court decision again to reapportion the state, because reapportionment and gerrymandering is one of the main reasons we have this gridlock. So I wondered if you would comment on that.
Well, we passed, people of Florida, a couple of years ago, 2 constitutional amendments that set some standards for both legislative and congressional reapportionment. This was the first time those standards have been put into effect. And the federal courts generally approved of what the legislature produced under those new standards. Now it's going to be interesting to see if at the elections on November the 6th, the new apportionment results in a greater balance of the legislature. In Florida, Democrats outnumber Republicans in registration by about 200,000 to 300,000. So you would think that the legislature and the Congress would reflect that. In fact, both the legislature and the Congress are about 2 to 1 Republican. And there are a number of reasons for that, but one of them is these apportionment lines. We'll see after November 6th whether the new standards, which the federal courts have largely approved, will result in more balance in our legislative bodies. Yes, sir.
My name is Bob Porter Betty, and I had the good sense to come down to Okamek 8 years ago from Vermont to be residents of Gainesville in this wonderful place.
Where was your home in Vermont, Bob?
Actually, it was in Norwich, but I was at the medical center at Dartmouth. I wanted to congratulate you on your book. I think you found a new career. It's available on ebook.
Yeah.
My question is, in the down-ticket elections that are coming along soon, there'll be a bunch of new freshmen coming into Congress. Would you speak a word or two about the pressures that are brought to bear to sign the so-called pledge and what that does to the dialogue in Congress?
Well, the pledge, I guess, that you're referring to is a pledge which you sign before the election, and you take a lifetime commitment that you will never vote for any increase in taxes. That's the so-called Grover Norquist pledge. I think it's very destructive. There was a famous British politician named Edmund Burke who had cast a vote that was contrary to the desires of his constituents. And they were very angry at him. Why did you not vote the way we wanted you to vote? And his answer was, when you elected me, you elected a number of aspects. The most important was my judgment. I have the opportunity to go to London and spend whatever time is necessary to fully understand the issues, the ramifications, the consequences, and I will use that judgment for your benefit to vote in ways that I think will serve yours and the nation's long-term interest. When that use of my judgment results in a disagreement with you, then I have a responsibility to have an open discussion. And either you'll convince me that I was wrong or I'll convince you. But I am not going to surrender the most important thing that I offer you, which is my judgment. Well, I would use the Burke standard for the Norquist pledge. We ought to be electing people to positions in which they've got to make a judgment. As an example, higher education in Florida has been ravaged in recent years. When I was governor, the standard was that the state would supply 75% of the cost of undergraduate education, and others, including student tuition, would provide the other 25%. Today, the state is less than 50%, and students are about 40% of the cost of education. Now, there are some real ramifications of that in terms of access. What about students who are not going to be able to afford those higher levels of tuition? What does it say about our ability to produce enough doctors, engineers, physicists, and other people that we need to support a modern economy? So I think that a person who gets elected is going to have to face those kinds of trade-offs and make a decision and not feel that they are, for their political lifetime, committed to one point of view, whether in their real judgment it continues to be the most appropriate one for the people they represent.
Casey? Senator Graham, just really quick, this gentleman here has ceded me just a couple of seconds of your time, of his time. My name is Garrett Weiner. I am the son of Arthur and Phyllis Saarinen. A side note, when you were governor, I actually was about 9 years old riding around on a bicycle in Fort Lauderdale, and I would get into trouble here and there, and when I did, I would often tell people that I was your son. Just wanted to let you know, not to dirty your name, but just so I could get out of trouble.
Yeah, good.
You did? Yeah. Oh, hey, Dad. Number 2. Anyway, I just flew in from Singapore indirectly. I flew in last night, and one of the things that I was confounded by when I got off the plane and into my rental car was the number of false information that was out there in terms of commercials that was essentially named by the candidate, right? That was approved by the candidates. And from a generational perspective, this is one of the concerns that I have, is it feels like things are devolving in such a way that it's a win-at-all-cost, do-anything mentality. And it causes me a lot of concerns, even before we get to the issues, because how can we really understand what the issues are when there's so much misinformation out there? So what are your thoughts on how this can be rectified going forward? I mean, do we just have to have, I have absolutely no idea, actually. Yeah. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts.
Well, the Constitution of the United States protects free speech. It does not require that free speech be truthful. Yeah. And it is up to the listener to make a judgment as to whether what I'm hearing is fabrication or reality. Now, one of the things that I think has been a very positive development is that journalists, both print and electronic, are paying more attention to this issue, and with things like PolitiFact, which is the Tampa Bay Times, which won the Pulitzer Prize, incidentally, for that, is now checking these facts and giving the voter an opportunity to, from a third impartial party, have an assessment of whether what they've just heard was truthful or not.
But even so, it seems like people aren't paying as much attention to that. So, for instance, somebody can get up in a debate and say something, or in a speech and say something, and the fact that they were corrected later on doesn't really have very much impact because people now believe what the candidate said and have not heard what that correction is.
Yeah, I mean, that's where this imbalance of money can be significant. If someone tells a statement that's not truthful, but they tell it vigorously and frequently, and the other side doesn't have the resources to respond, then misstatements and, frankly, lies are likely to be accepted. Again, I'm trying to avoid being partisan, but I'd like, particularly with our friend from the Dartmouth Medical School, what was your medical specialty, sir?
I was an orthopedic surgeon, but involved nationally in some organizations.
Well, let me tell you a story that happened to me. A very good friend of mine died of colon cancer. He died because he had failed to get the regular, I think if you're over the age of 55, you're supposed to have one every 10 years. Is that correct? Yeah. I may have what is the right number? If you're over 55, how frequently are you supposed to have a colonoscopy?
5 years.
Every 5 years? Okay. Well, he hadn't done it. By the time that he discovered that he had it, it was terminal. Well, I was on the Senate Finance Committee, which is the committee that has jurisdiction over Medicare. I became interested, would Medicare have paid for my friend to have had that early treatment? Well, the answer is, and you nodded your head no, and that's right, up until last year. I introduced a bill to extend Medicare to include colonoscopies. I have a hard time pronouncing that word, which didn't pass. And the reason it didn't pass is I thought there was, as a layperson, that there was only one way to test whether you had cancer in your colon. I quickly found out that there were a number of ways, at least there were professed ways to do it, and that this god-awful fight broke out in the Senate Finance Committee over which of these different methodologies was the most appropriate. Well, if there ever was a group of people who were totally incompetent to make a judgment about the means of surveying your colon, it was the members of the Senate Finance Committee. But the result was that nothing happened, and Medicare continued not to cover colon screenings. Then I introduced a second bill, which was say, let's come up with some system different than individual members of Congress having to introduce a bill in order to change the services that Medicare would cover. Let's have somebody who actually knows something about this subject matter. And I propose that we set up a panel of professionals who would evaluate, is this procedure, first, is it efficacious? Does it actually help the patient? And second, is it cost effective? Is the cost of the procedure worth the benefit that will come from administering it? That also failed. I didn't have too good a record at this point. now under the Affordable Care Act and some amendments to Medicare, colon screenings are going to be covered, and there will be a 15-person panel who will make judgments as to when new procedures should be added to the list of those covered by Medicare, and the Congress will then have, I think it's 80 days, to either approve or disapprove. If they fail to take action, then the new procedure comes under Medicare for funding. Now, I think that's a pretty rational system. But have you heard the words death panels? Well, that's what that process has now been characterized as if there's going to be 15 people in dark, shrouded robes and daggers going around trying to kill people. Actually, who would you rather have making a decision as to the appropriateness of a medical procedure? The chairman of a congressional subcommittee or the dean of a medical school? Well, it wouldn't take me long to figure out who I'd rather have. That very practice is now going to go into effect, and it covers a range of preventive services. But in the presidential debates, it's still being described as unelected bureaucrats who are going to take over your health care. I think that's very destructive, and frankly, if you will read Sunday's Tampa Bay Times, there's going to be an op-ed on this subject. I will not say who the author of the op-ed is, but...
All right, we have two more questions. Yours are first.
Governor,
Stand, you have the microphone? Put it up to your mouth.
I'm Izzy Sheever, a graduate of Florida, and we're native Floridians.
Yeah. What year did you graduate, Izzy?
Well, I went to graduate school here. I graduated in 63 and 67. Mm-hmm. But my question is, if the Republicans don't win this election, will the Republican Party move more to the right or be more moderate in 4 years?
Well, I'll have to confess that just like Dr. Pepper, I get called at 2, 10, and 4 by the Republican Party asking me how they should position themselves. So I've had a lot of experience in this matter. I have given them some extremely wise and sage advice, which I'm committed not to disclose to anyone else. So I can't give you the answer to that question because I don't think anybody knows what the answer to that question will be. I think should President Obama be reelected, how will the Republican Party interpret that? Will they interpret it as the American people made a big mistake and we shouldn't adjust our policies or the way we organize our politics, or that we need to begin to move back towards the center? That'll be one of the many interesting things to watch after the November 6th election.
Now, the last question Phyllis Saarinen has, and before that, I'd like to just make this comment about her son's observation. I recall a famous journalist of the past saying once, and I thought it was quite a remarkable statement, that freedom for the wise and the intelligent is so important that it's worth the price of making the stupid free also.
Phyllis Saarinen. I'm a retired water resource economist. My husband and I have lived at Oak Hammock since the very earliest time. There's one issue which overshadows all else that has not been mentioned by either candidate, and about which the Obama administration has done a little but not much, and that is climate warming and sea level rise, to which Florida is probably the most economically vulnerable in all the world. If Obama is elected to a second term, Do you think he will make a move in that direction of bringing some consolidation to all the various states' attempts to act on their own?
The answer is, I know where Obama's heart is on this issue. He appointed me as the co-chair of the commission that investigated the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf, and that gave me an opportunity to meet with him in a small group on several occasions, and this issue came up frequently. I think he has frankly made a political judgment that there isn't much chance that a major change in policy on climate warming will pass the Congress, and therefore is relying on a number of smaller executive type actions. As an example, the fact that about 10 or 15 years from now, your car is going to have to get over 50 miles a gallon on the highway. Well, great, okay. You are in the leadership of the vanguard, but others will go where you have already tread. And so I think unless there appears to be a political shift in the Congress to a greater level of receptivity, I think we're going to continue on these sort of important but relatively small and incoherent initiatives.
Well, in spite of a very long and wearying day, Senator Graham has brought clarity and vitality to this discussion. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you.